Welcome to the Free Marketeers, the official podcast of the Free Market Foundation.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the latest episode of the Free Marketeers podcast. You're listening to host for this week, Chris Hattingh. I'm a researcher at the Free Market Foundation, and I'm joined by legal researcher Martin van Staden. Unfortunately, Mpiaki Glamini is not here, so we'll have to make do without his. We'll have to make do without his data crunching skills. I'm sure we'll manage. We won't give you any financial advice, I'll say that much.
Mm-hmm.
Martin, for our first topic this week, I thought we'd talk about guns, as Americans would like to call them. The Educators Union of South Africa has called for teachers to be allowed to bring guns to school to protect themselves and their students. This follows from an attack on a teacher at, his name was, I'm going to try and pronounce his name, Esponiso Nyawase. He's 48 years old. He was shot dead on Tuesday morning at a primary school in the south of Durban.
Oh, geez, a primary school.
So, very sad news, unfortunately, and now this union has called for teachers to be armed. Apparently, two random people entered the school, despite there being a security guard who is employed by the Department of Education. We all know if the security guards are around, we'll all be safe. We shouldn't worry.
I even doubt that he had a firearm, to be completely honest.
Very sure he didn't have a firearm.
Yeah, jeez.
So what are your thoughts on this? Don't you, let me play devil's advocate for a bit, don't you think this is going to lead to teachers maybe pulling out their guns on unruly students, that kind of thing? We always have images of the Wild West when people call for more people to be armed.
Well, sure. I don't think the problem then is that they're armed. I think the problem then is the mentality of the teachers. I mean, whether they have a gun or not, if they have that kind of temperament that they're going to start killing children, it doesn't matter whether they have guns, knives, or just their fists.
Yeah.
That's an argument I often make against the anti-gun crowd, is like when they say, if you're a woman in South Africa, you should be very concerned if your partner has a firearm. It's like, if your partner wants to kill you, it really shouldn't matter what tools they're going to use.
You might need to reconsider that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is there is a person living with you and sleeping next to you who wants to kill you. So that the problem is not that they may have a gun. The problem is that they're going to kill you while you're sleeping with a pillow over your head. So I don't think that's going to be a problem with, even if we have all teachers armed at schools. I don't think the problem will be that they're going to start shooting children or I don't know what other things you can get up to with guns at a school, but it's going to be a problem if we continue to have a very undisciplined teacher corps in South Africa, I guess. I'm not going to say don't do it. I think it's probably a good idea. I'm very pro-gun.
Yeah.
If you feel you're in danger, you should get a gun. I know the same is true for the paramedics profession in South Africa. They've also called for arming paramedics because they get called out and then robbed and killed. I think if you're a teacher and you want to be armed, get yourself armed. Then you need to obviously satisfy the competency training and all the regulations, which, right. I mean, we can have a separate conversation about whether that's good or not. But the point is the standard will be the same, so it's not like we should lower standards for teachers.
Sure.
But yeah, I think I'm a fan. The police have admitted repeatedly that they cannot keep us safe. So there's really no other option unless we're going to start employing massive security companies to turn schools into prisons.
With all the costs that go with that. So
yeah.
And lots of parents can't afford. I mean, they can barely afford to send their kids to school in the first place.
No, exactly.
Never mind those costs. Luckily, Mpiaki isn't here to debate this with me now, but I think one of the proper roles and responsibilities of the government is to protect the citizens, and government is failing at that. It's plain and simple for all of us to see. Even if the police say they can, we can see the proof in the pudding. Like you say, they say they can't, so at least they're honest in that regard. But now, I mean, it's a sad reality, but people are going to have to, when they value their own lives and their own security, they're now going to look at means of protecting themselves. Yeah,
the even worse part is that while the police say they cannot protect us, at the very same time they're proposing the private security industry regulation amendment bill to basically stop private security companies from owning semi-automatic firearms now.
Okay.
Now this is part of Bekitele's broader plan to disarm the civilian population. The same person who says that the police cannot do their job, by the way. So he wants to make sure we have a gun-free South Africa and that, how did he put it? The only people who should have firearms are the military and the police, and I think he said something like paramilitary or something. But, geez, in a country with, well, what was the last time? Homicide rate of about 50 people a day being murdered in this country, a rape every like 4 minutes or something, reported rapes.
Yes.
So
yeah, never mind. Yeah, like you said, it's important they're a reported thing, and you don't know how many are unreported, because the women know, and I mean men who also get raped, they know there's probably nothing going to happen.
No, exactly, and it's quite insane. It's been said many times that South Africa, outside of war zones, is probably the most unsafe place to be. And at the same time, we have this police force trying to take away the tools that we use to defend ourselves. I mean, that's sick to me. That's quite sickening. And yeah, certainly we need to encourage civilian firearm ownership, because, I mean, the only, in America they say an armed society is a polite society. If you as a would-be murderer don't know like how many people in the house have guns, you're gonna be like, geez, maybe this isn't such a such a good idea. And I mean, currently criminals know how tightly regulated firearms are, so they now think, well, there is probably a gun in the house, but it's locked in a safe, and I'm quick enough to get past whatever they're gonna do and get to them before they can get to their guns. So even if we do liberalize it a bit more in that respect, in that but the police don't try to disarm us, I think we should also reconsider some of these, I would guess, petty requirements that at all times the firearm must be in a safe, and silly things like that, just to make it even just a little bit more safer for us, especially at night when we're alone at home. So yeah, I'm very much in favor of gun rights for anyone who wants it, basically. And yeah, that private schools, parents will be able to insist on what kind of training teachers should have, for example. I guess government can do the same at state schools. But yeah, in principle, I agree. I mean, I don't think from the free market perspective there's too much disagreement there. I've seen a lot of people saying, geez, if I send my kid to school and I know the teacher has a gun, I'm going to feel a bit iffy. But I think that's probably an irrational concern to have, because like I said earlier, if the teacher wants to kill your kid, whether they have a gun or not, I mean that shouldn't be the concern.
Yes.
The concern should be the fact that the teacher wants to kill the kid.
I'd like to, I guess, in a way, punt the sort of we'd call it probably virtue signaling aspect, but if you think about how women are disproportionately affected by violence, domestic violence, that kind of thing in the country, and like you said, I guess for a lot of people, women are asked, what were you wearing, or why were you in this place late at night? Sort of there's responsibilities placed on them for what they were doing when they were attacked. Whereas if we made it easier for people to own firearms, women wouldn't need to worry about those sorts of things. I mean, if you, like you said, if a person is going to attack a woman and doesn't know if she has a firearm or not, he's probably not going to take that risk. Whereas nowadays, he probably thinks she doesn't, and why would she? And if she even wanted to, it's going to be very difficult for her to own one. So I think that's important to consider as well. We talk a lot about being progressive as a society and equal sharing of responsibilities, but then we don't enact these things. We sort of appoint women to parliamentary portfolio committees, to departments, as a sort of way of, I guess, saving face. I don't know, of saying, oh, we do care and we're trying, but actually on the ground,
we don't trust them to defend themselves.
Not like they're individual adults.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always important to note, I think, Becky Taylor said that South Africa shouldn't become like the United States, where people shoot up nightclubs and schools. But if he did any kind of research into it, which I'm quite sure he didn't, you would see that most gun crime, gun murders, and etc. happen in the cities and the states with the strictest firearm regulations. It's not an absolute rule. I know Nevada is very lax on firearm regulation, and they had that big shooting a few years ago.
But didn't you know, Martin, if there's a sign on a building that says no guns allowed, the burglar or anyone will just it sort of evaporates.
Yeah, no. I mean, I've always wondered, why didn't they just put up like a sign saying no crime allowed or no murder allowed? I mean, let's solve the problem in one fell swoop. Jeez. So yeah, it's ridiculous. You look at countries. Or America is a good example, because it hasn't reached that level of European pacifism where you can have strict gun regulations and low crime at the same time. I guess America is a bit more normal
Right.
than Europe, which is it's actually a bigger philosophical question.
Yeah.
What's wrong with Europeans? Why are they so timid? I don't know.
It might also be a homogenous thing.
I
compared
guess.
to the history, America's always been a country of immigrants.
Mm.
And in that regard as well, you don't want the government to enforce sort of people living together and being happy and harmonious.
Yeah.
They have to build that up for themselves.
Yes.
And when they're more secure in their property, there's trust that gets built over time.
Yeah, and in America, I think this has been done pretty well.
Yeah.
And in states and cities where gun rights are liberal, and liberal in the classical sense, crime is relatively low, and people know that, geez, if I just go into someone's house and start robbing the place, I'm going to get shot. So yeah, I subscribe to the idea that armed society is a polite society. I think in South Africa we have 3 million gun owners, civilian gun owners, and they've done quite a bit with this right. We have the concerned citizens movement, apps like Zello or something. You press a button, you say, I'm here, someone's attacking me, and then within minutes you have neighbors there with guns ready to help you. I wish more townships, specifically areas, would adopt this model. I don't see that's happened. And another thing which I don't really want to mention because
but you're going to anyway.
Yeah, I'm an individualist, so mentioning this goes a bit against my principles. But gun rights are something that all South Africans across race seem to come together on.
Sure.
A few months ago, I wrote an article about gun rights, and then I believe it was Power FM interviewed me, and I was 100% sure that I was going to have a hostile host. I was going to have hostile callers, and everyone's just going to say, you're insane. South Africa is a crime-ridden mess. We can't give people guns. What are you talking about? Instead, I had a very receptive host. He was a black gentleman, and not one white person called in, all black men, not one black woman, unfortunately. And all of them said, how dare the police even propose to disarm us when they are the ones losing guns, and they are the ones even sometimes partaking in crime. And they were saying, you cannot take away our right to defend ourselves and our families. And you see this on the Gun Owners South Africa Facebook group. It's a very multiracial conglomeration of people, which is not the same when you talk about free markets, liberal politics, which is still to a large extent a very white affair. But when it comes to guns, and it makes me feel very good that this is not made into another so-called white issue. People just want guns because they're defending their white privilege against poor black people. No, this is all South Africans saying, geez, we really want to be safe, for goodness sakes. And I mean, you mentioned before we started the IRR's latest research. They said that other than land reform and politics, most South Africans want crime to be taken care of. So it's something we all come together on. We want to own guns to protect ourselves.
It would also be good to look at South African history, and you wonder what sort of atrocities might not have been committed if citizens were armed. You would know, I think you would know the history a lot better than I would, of sort of the steps that different governments throughout South African history took, be they British or Afrikaans or whomever, whichever party was in charge, to disarm citizens. Or at least, definitely a certain race group in South Africa.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a good point. In both Rhodesia and in South Africa, which the history I know pretty well, the one thing that the British colonial governments were not liberal on, and on many other things they were much more liberal than the Afrikaners, saying there should be equal rights, equal voting for black people. The only two things that they were not liberal on was gun ownership for black people, specifically black people, and selling alcohol to black people. So they said, yes, we must have equal rights, equal property rights, equal voting rights. But, oh geez, that black person wants a gun. No, I don't think so. That, So yes, in South Africa, I guess the one thing that unites all governments throughout history in South Africa is that they do not want black people to own guns. Nowadays, they also don't want white people to own guns, but consistency is black people and guns do not go together. So I think it's fundamentally a racist institution.
Racist or paternalistic.
And as you point out, I think it's a great point. If that element was not there, if we had in 1910 10 million armed blacks in this country, would they have gone to the National Convention and said, maybe we should keep black people out of the political system and take away their land. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. No, I do not think they would have done that, because there would have been bloodshed, and I think there should have been bloodshed.
Yeah.
Definitely, because I mean, every time in history where we see in like the worst kinds of tyranny, Khmer Rouge in Thailand, was it Thailand or Laos? Of course, Hitler's Germany.
Yeah.
This always happens after the people are disarmed.
Yes.
So
And it's always done with noble intentions, of course.
yeah, of course. It's we want to protect you, but we're also gonna do these other things that we don't want to talk too much about.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's disarmament of the civilian population is always a prelude to disaster for civilians.
Yeah.
You may find yourself in a very cosmopolitan Western society, but that can change.
Yes.
In an instant, the economy may collapse, and suddenly you have a rising. I mean, the left say there's a rising populist right wing currently taking over the West. So ask yourself, if you are on the left wing, do you want these populist right wingers to be the only ones with guns?
Yes.
And I mean, the answer to that should be no. And it's good to see in America with the rise of Trump that a lot of left-wing people have now embraced gun rights.
Yeah, it's awesome.
They've embraced states' rights and all these so-called conservative institutions. And it's like, this is great. This is, but hopefully they'll remember this when they have a Democrat in government again. So the tables can always be turned on you using the tools that you brought in.
Yeah.
So rather adopt a principle and a policy that there should be liberty for everyone, and always assume that whatever you do in government, your opponent can just as easily use against you. And I think the ANC should probably think, wow, geez, hypothetically, what if the National Party came back? What then? Do we want to be disarmed? And no, the answer should be no. We want our people to have guns and to be able to defend themselves.
Okay. Moving on to our second topic, not related at all to the first one, although, you know, as a philosopher, maybe one can say all these things are somehow connected. But our second topic, according to a quarterly index which was compiled by RMB, that's Rand Merchant Bank, and the Stellenbosch University's Bureau for Economic Research, business confidence failed to lift in the second quarter of this year. It's hovering at a 2-year low now, and I hope this isn't shocking news to anyone, maybe to President Ramaphosa, because he is shocked at everything. That is sort of a running meme. Someone should make a shocked President Ramaphosa meme, please. But this isn't news to us, given different policies in the works, the recent election. My biggest concern is expropriation without compensation. Why would any local or foreign business invest in the country if the prospect could arise that their property could be taken? And again, I want to reinforce the point, expropriation without compensation will not just focus on farmland or even white farmland. It's going to include, the effect will be that all property is up for seizure by the state. So no matter your skin color, how much or how little you own, the state can come in and take it and say this is for our own purposes. So Martin, is this shocking news to you?
No, it shouldn't be. And last week we discussed the contracting economy, which people were also very shocked about. And again, my answer is no, absolutely. This cannot be shocking, because we discussed, I think in the first quarter of this year, the fact that business confidence was low. And I mean, for all these same reasons, it's remaining low because government has not changed course. Like I think we said in that podcast, the only way to get business to be confident about the situation in South Africa is to say unequivocally, your property will be safe. And not just say it like the president is doing. He's saying, no, we won't touch your property. It's
or he
fine.
says it to some audiences, which is also the problem. When he speaks to foreign investors, he brings up this point, but then at sort of, I guess, party conferences and things, and before the election, he would say something else.
Yeah, no, so you should say it, but you should also live it out and tell your party, tell your political allies, there will be no amendment to the Constitution come hell or high water. And we need to be very careful about blaming the private sector for this, because it's something that's very easy to do.
Right.
And I read a speech recently, I can't for the life of me not remember who gave it. I think it was at Discovery or something. And this individual was saying that the businesses have not yet come to the party totally, and that government in a way is waiting for businesses to pick up the slack. And I mean, how ridiculous is it to say such a thing when government is using every opportunity at its disposal at every level of government, whether it's national, provincial, municipal, every mandate that it covers, agriculture, fisheries, water, the competition, it uses every opportunity to undermine what ordinary South Africans, whether rich or poor, are doing to better their own lives.
Right.
So you want to start a business, government says, geez, I see you want to use your house as an Airbnb. My goodness, we cannot just allow that, surely.
That's anarchy.
Yeah, no, geez. And oh, you want to use your car as a ride-sharing platform on Uber. No, geez, we need to regulate that. Or wow, you're using these tokens, bitcoins on your cell phone. We can't let you do that, so let's investigate whether we should regulate that. So do not blame the private sector for not coming to the table when, in fact, whenever the private sector tries to better itself and in so doing better the lot of consumers, because the only way to get ahead in life is to satisfy the needs and wants of others, you undermine them.
Yeah.
And this government, I cannot believe that this government has not realized that the poor economic or the economic contraction that we're seeing, the high levels of unemployment, the social unrest, are all basically direct results of it strangling the economy to death.
Yes.
Strangling the private sector to death with this idea of the developmental state. The state must be the center of all development, and anything that happens outside of that context must be squashed or regulated in the extreme. We cannot blame the private sector for that. They pay the tax. They are what keeps the government running in a very perverse way, even though the government is always punishing them for it. So we need to be very careful to not say the private sector must pull its weight, must pay its fair share. It's paying its fair share and then some in impossible circumstances. No. And I don't want this to seem like I'm a shill for the private sector, because there are big businesses that do heinous things. Some companies very much fall in line with government government programs and try to encourage them even more. Also, some business person a few months ago very much embraced expropriation without compensation. I think he's a representative of like a coalition of businesses, and he said EWC would be good as long as it's done within the law. Well, that's exactly what government...
Yeah, once you change the law...
Yeah, that's exactly what government is saying it's going to do. And I mean, it was done in terms of the law to an extent in Venezuela and in Zimbabwe. That doesn't matter. It's certainly done within the law in North Korea.
No.
It's insane. It's a stupid standard.
Wasn't apartheid done within the law?
Of course. It was a legal system, all based on legislation.
Hitler was voted in.
Exactly. And then the extermination of Jewish persons had its basis in some racial laws that were passed in the 1930s. So the private sector is to blame for some things. But if you look at the ordinary businesses just trying to get along day by day, we cannot blame them for what's happening. We need government to fundamentally change course in a political, philosophical sense, in a policy sense, in an economic sense. And that's the only way that we can get out of this morass, and that's the only way that business, international and domestic businesses, will say, hey, maybe this is a good place to invest.
Right. I think you bring up very good points. I was reading a piece on a blog site called New Ideal. It's run by the Ayn Rand Institute, and there's a speech embedded in the article by Ayn Rand. She gave it, I think, a convention, or I can't remember the exact year and all that, where exactly she was talking about. She talked about the sanction of the victims. So the businesses in this case are the victims of these policies and this philosophy of punishing people for being productive. But in a way, they're rewarding that. They keep on sort of fueling their own, I don't know if it's a perverseness of, you know, want to cause your own suffering or something like that. But so I wish businesses would make their voices not even louder, but be heard. And call out government for things that they're doing that's affecting their own ability to operate. It's in a business's nature to make a profit, to employ people. That is what they do, and that's good, and it's moral. But they're punished for that. I mean, productive individuals are taxed more for being productive, and people are being driven overseas. And you know, then we get upset, and we call those people not patriotic. And I think
it's a catch-22.
It's very odd to me to hear that kind of thing, because you hear a lot of expat South Africans who are heartbroken about leaving the country. Like, South Africa, there is something about it. It stays within you. People's roots, that kind of thing, and it's not like they want to leave and they leave on a whim. It's simply a case of survival at some point. The problem is people are punished for just wanting to get on with life. A lot of the racial legislation that still persists in South Africa, it's just the fact that people who are adversely affected by this
they're not trying to attain world dominance.
No.
They want their children to go to university. That's as simple as that. And once their child comes back, tears in their eyes, saying, I was rejected from going to university even though I got 6 distinctions, my goodness, now I'm not, what do I do with my life now? Of course they're going to say, well, we're jetting off, we're leaving. This is unacceptable. And geez, it's I feel worst for the poor. And this is a point you often make, is that while the middle class and the upper classes can scrounge some money together and say, okay, we're gonna go be poor in another country, the poor, if government undermines them, they need to take it. They need to tough it out. And
no, they can't leave South Africa.
Yeah, it's impossible. And many of them like move to a different province where things are better, and that causes its own problems. So yeah, it's quite problematic that government, for some, the philosophy underlying it is I mean, in a word, evil.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, that they just want to always be meddling in people's affairs when all those people want is to get on with life. They just want to go from day to day and enjoy life and not constantly worry about what they're doing, jealous with some idealistic utopian vision for the future. In South Africa, this notion of transformationism.
We have like some kind of workers' paradise where we all have jobs assigned to us, and we never have to worry about making our own mistakes, and you know, life is messy, unfortunately. That's difficult for people in government. It has been, I guess, throughout South Africa's history. It's been difficult for our governments to understand that people are going to make mistakes, and but perhaps, you know, might just be a small chance if you leave them alone and let them live and work. They might actually build this country that everyone always brings up, this ideal rainbow nation.
No, exactly, and the thing is, without government regulation, the mistakes that people make are far more evident than when there is government regulation and government makes only one mistake and it applies to everyone. For some reason, people don't perceive that as easily as multiple small mistakes. So, for example, the so-called student debt loan crisis. I put crisis in scare quotes because these students agreed to take these loans. They're adults. They need to pay these loans back. It's very simple. We see this as a massive crisis, but if government nationalizes higher education and says, okay, you don't have these debts anymore, we're going to provide it for free, and then the economy hurts because of increased taxes to pay for that, we don't see that as a crisis. We see the student debt loan crisis because people are making mistakes. They're making choices of taking loans that they cannot pay back, and this tugs at our heart, and we're like, oh my goodness, that's sad. But if that is swept away and government provides so-called free education, and the economy suffers, we don't have that same reaction. I guess it's the same principle as Stalin, or was it Lenin, saying that one death is a tragedy and million deaths are a statistic. So tragedies on a big unitary scale we don't perceive, but many small tragedies, individual, we're like, oh my goodness, government needs to do something, but in so doing creates this massive tragedy. So yeah, we need, you make a great point, we need to understand in a free society and a free market, people will make mistakes, they must be free to make mistakes, and we should resist the temptation to try and outsource individual responsibility to government, because not only is that immoral, but that will also cause a far bigger tragedy, which will be to many people imperceptible, but will nonetheless be there.
Okay, Martin, I think that's a good note to end on. Listeners, I'd encourage you to keep these sort of aspects in mind when you when you read specific articles, try and link it to other things that might be going on. These things aren't in isolation, nothing is in a vacuum, and everything that the government does has an effect on all of us, disproportionately so on poorer people. Martin, will you just remind everyone where they can find our work?
Definitely. Please, first thing, subscribe to this channel. It's the big red button right under this video. Follow us on Twitter, that is at FMF South Africa, one word. Like us on Facebook, that is facebook.com/FMFSA, or search Free Market Foundation South Africa. And then, as always, please remember to visit our website regularly. That's www.freemarketfoundation.com. Cheers.